Good evening and welcome. Welcome to our masterclass. My name is Marjorie Wharton, and I am one of your panelists this evening. And we're going to be talking about the topic anxiety or high functioning anxiety. Where do you fit in? Now, this was a discussion that we began a few weeks ago on our Instagram live show. Sonia and I have an Instagram live show that takes place or was taking place for a while on Friday evenings, and it's entitled Wisdom Without Wounds. And this was a topic that came up, and we talked about it there. But following that discussion, we wanted to expand and we wanted to take it a little further and bring in another professional who would be able to share information with us from her perspective as someone who works differently and, well, specifically in the medical profession. So, here with me this evening are my two panelists. Sonia Layne-Gartside, the author of the book Workplace Anxiety, and my co host for that show on Instagram Live, a coach, a trainer, a facilitator, and all of those good things. And joining us is Adesha Richards-Thornhill. Welcome
Hi,
to both of you, ladies.
thank you.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
having me.
Okay,
Yeah.
now Adesha is a psychotherapist. I wrote it down because I wanted to make sure that I got the right title. And
Yes, please.
as such, is a medical professional, whereas Sonia and I would have worked or studied anxiety more from the point of view as part of our coaching training and certification. We wanted to have someone who was coming at it with a different background, who would bring a different perspective, because we know that anxiety right now is really something that's it's pressure on all of us, and we have to figure out how to cope and deal with it. So, ladies, we are going to have a great discussion this evening. And I thought perhaps we could just start off by Adesha asking you to maybe just kind of set the scene for us about anxiety.
Mhm. So, anxiety is classified as a mental health disorder. Usually, it's diagnosed by those who have had excessive worry or unrealistic thoughts for a period of usually 6 months or more. I know we're used to sometimes people saying, like, I have anxiety, I feel anxious, and it's very like short term or periodic based on what's happening in their life. But for an official diagnosis of anxiety, you have to be experiencing it for more than 6 months. It can look like racing thoughts. It can look like what we call rumination, when you play things in a loop constantly in your mind. Anxiety can look like those that have thoughts that are all or nothing. Things are very extreme. It should be this way. It has to be like that, and they're not able to experience their thoughts or life in the middle.
Mm,
Very like black or white, kind of thinking. So it's a thought disorder. It has a lot to do with your thinking, your self-talk, and then how that then impacts your functioning. So on the outside, it looks like tension. It looks like a lot of stress. Sometimes it can manifest physically. The more severe cases is when people are having panic attacks where they feel like almost like a heart attack,
hmm.
where they have like heart palpitations, they have shortness of breath, things like that.
Okay. All right. So that perhaps, so when we are talking then as individuals, as laymen, just talking about anxiety, we
Mhm.
may not be really fully there, but we are on the path and we are experiencing some of the symptoms, but maybe not all of them.
Yeah, you could be experiencing mild anxiety, or just anxious. Anxious is, it's a feeling.
Okay.
Mm.
All right. And Sonia, now I have to confess to everyone here, I was not aware of the term high functioning anxiety until you brought it into our discussion for that show.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I never thought of it, but then as we went through the process and you started talking about some of the things that it included, I began to realize that that was really how I quote unquote live my life. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about high functioning anxiety and what we are talking about when we
Mm.
use that term.
Yeah, and I think Adesha started us off well because the type of high functioning anxiety I am talking about is a milder form of anxiety. It's not a clinical disorder. So we're not at that point, and it's generally brought on by the stressors of work, family, life. And as you go through life, you to the outside, you look fine. You're most likely succeeding, but the internal life is where you're feeling all that anxiousness, that worry. You're constantly in the future, so it's like constantly overthinking and analyzing. You could be ruminating but about something that happened at work, and be obsessed with how you could have responded differently to avoid it from happening. It's striving for perfection. It's insomnia. You can't sleep at night. You find that you're tired but you're not sleeping. It's that constant fear of, or that low grade fear of failure that you're constantly having, that really limits the ability for you to move forward feeling good about yourself. It's fatigue. It's that need to please other people. So it comes in a variety of forms. And so it's not at that level where you can go to someone, and we usually start, Marjorie, by saying if it is at that level, then we are not the people for you to talk to,
Yeah.
right? You go to
Correct.
somebody.
Yes.
Yes, we're
Mhm.
Yeah.
we're not there, but we're
Mhm.
able to, as coaches, as trainers, we're able to note in someone when we say, I think that you should seek some professional help on this.
Mhm.
I think
Mhm.
you should stop self medicating and go to a professional to deal with that.
Mhm.
And those are the ways that we see it. But it's really that sense of everything looks great. You look successful to everyone from the outside, but your internal life and your ability to function
Mhm.
is a struggle.
Yeah. Now,
Yes.
why I asked you to go there to talk a little bit about that definition was because from the first time I heard this, couldn't understand what was the problem with it. Because as far as I'm concerned, high functioning anxiety as it is described to me is just life. That's just how you
Mhm.
live. You have to be concerned about the future. You have to worry about things falling apart. You have to be able to put things in place and on and on and on. And to me, that's perfectly normal. I don't think for my entire working life, I don't even know if maybe from when I was at school, I don't think there's ever been a time when I have not been doing that. And so that
Mhm.
adrenaline pushes me and pushes me. And so it occurred to me, I may not be the only one in the world who's living their life like this and thinking it's normal.
Mhm.
Well,
That
it
is
has
very
become
true.
normalized, actually.
It has.
So I said to myself, okay, I need to get some medical professional up in here to start talking about what
Mhm.
I need to do differently. So,
Yes.
Adesha, do you see that there's anything wrong with this quote unquote high functioning anxiety?
Absolutely, 100%. I
Oh,
see many clients that have all of the things that Sonia expressed, and they
Yeah.
think that they are fine until they're not, right?
mhm,
And
Hmm.
so it is normalized. I think it's culturally normalized as Caribbeans, right? You always hear we're the ones that work hard. We have women, one, two, three jobs. We're constantly. It's kind of like it's something that has been taught to us. But I think it is excessive, and it does not teach us how to experience life on the other side of quality. So, like you were saying, that constant adrenaline and using that for motivation, it looks great on the outside. Those are what I call the high achievers,
mhm,
right? High achieving people usually have, high functioning anxiety. Things look great, they're successful, they're accomplishing a lot of goals. But like Sonia said, what goes on the inside, is really difficult. Those are the thoughts that I'm talking about. So they're being driven by these excessive thoughts of, what if things falls apart?
mhm.
I have to do this. This is next. I got to get the house. I got to do the mortgage. I got to figure this out. I need to get the promotion. And so they're like in anxiety about these things.
Mhm.
Okay. So sorry for keep using myself as the example, but I'm telling you, girl, what you've described there to me means that that's how I'm coping. with all the million and one things that are coming my way, the only way for me to deal with and to handle and to manage is to worry about what I'm doing now, worry about what's next, and prepare for the future and just keep going and going and going.
Right.
So, what are some of the side effects that we should be looking for from either of you? What are some of the side effects that we really ought to be looking out for when we realize, or to help us realize, that the high functioning anxiety is not the sweet spot that we seem to think it is?
Mm. So from a perspective where someone hasn't been diagnosed clinically anxious, what I usually say, there's a price you're paying, but you don't even realize it because you're so accustomed to the pain. And unfortunately, it's not sustainable. And so what often results is people burn out. And as Adesha says, until they come to a sudden halt, we keep going. And then one day you try to wake up, you wake up and you say, I'm getting up. And then you physically can't get up. Like your body has given out on you and you're in pain and you're like, okay, all right. And that's a sign that's the price that you pay for it. You push yourself so much and you ignore your body and all the signs that it's giving you, all the information that it's giving you. The body is so intelligent and we don't pay attention to the body because we are, as Adesha quite rightly says, we are taught as to override that, to get up from young. You're a woman, you get your first period, your mother says, but you can't lie down in bed all day. What are you going to do when you start to work? They push you right into the future and you're at school, right? And it sets that mindset that says, ignore what your body is telling you and keep going. And so we get overwhelmed, we get burned out. The second thing is that we don't understand what it means to have grit and grind and hustle. We think that grinding and hustling is just working one more email, getting something else done. I don't recognize that the most efficient way to do that, the way that people that you admire actually do it, is that they work hard, they hustle, they rest and recover, then they hustle again. And so we lack that understanding of what it means to really grind and really work hard. And so we do it wrong. And the other thing that we pay is that our existence, there's no joy in our existence, or it's limited, it's fleeting. We don't even spend time enjoying our successes because we're so busy in the future and wanting to control it that we rob ourselves of the daily joy of living. And so that's some of the things that I see as a result.
Mm.
That is spot on. The things that I work with clients on. So the body eventually shutting down, because it will respond eventually to what you're ignoring. The fleeting joy that Sonia is talking about, the inability to be mindful, to be present. Many people that are very anxious and always are constantly in the future, if you ask them, how did that feel? They can't pinpoint it because they're not present with their emotions. They're constantly on the next thing. So it loses the ability to be present today. You'll see those people that are like constantly on autopilot, right? So it's like, I'm in the motions of life, of my routine, of the day, of the next thing. But if you ask them like, what was a nice conversation you had? Did you notice that rainbow today? No, they couldn't tell you that because they're not present to experience those things. And then their emotions, I definitely agree that their positive emotions are fleeting because as soon as it happens, then you're thinking about something else. And so I think it also leads to possible dissatisfaction and unfulfillment in life eventually, because you're always chasing the next thing. You don't really truly know what it means like to be happy and to be content and to be peaceful. And so you're always looking for, well, when I get this job, I'll get that. Or when I get the promotion, I'll be happy. Or when I have X amount of money in my savings. And then life becomes about the things that I can accomplish for happiness rather than having an internal sense of happiness. And all these things are enhancing it.
Okay.
And I think to just summarize that, to bring that to a conclusion, is that people don't know when they have enough because there's so much constant you climb a hill, and we know this, when you climb a mountain and you get there, society rewards you, and then people look around and say, is this it? What else is there? Because it's so fleeting, and so you don't even recognize when you have enough to just enjoy life. And Marjorie, you and I say this all the time, that when we see clients, they don't see themselves very clearly, just because of exactly what Adesha is saying. And so you're chasing goals that sometimes you think you want them, but it's really just a comparison keeping up, and they're not making you happy because you haven't established what is enough for me. And
That's a good one. I like that you took it there, because one of the things I wanted to say, I think a lot of people don't know what you are saying or what you've identified as the symptoms. So you don't realize that you aren't experiencing joy. You don't realize that you don't have this internal sense of happiness because you're not looking for it. What you're looking for is the next project that you have to work on, you have to complete, you have to be good at. What you're working on is the next goal that you want to get done, and so on. So sometimes for a lot of people, they don't even begin to know that they are actually being affected in this way, and that they are living their lives in a way that's not totally effective. So, would you say that anxiety to high functioning anxiety is like a spectrum? That people fall somewhere in between the two and they don't even realize it? And
Yeah,
maybe
I absolutely think that they do. So most of the time when I do have clients, they usually start in the high functioning place where we're talking about. And then usually, I have to point out, where they're having difficulties, right? And then sometimes as it continues to get worse, the longer a person lives in that space, then the burnout does happen. Then the inability to function in their relationships and things like that. It starts to cost a lot more the longer it's there and it's being unaddressed.
Wow.
Yeah. And sometimes they don't even realize it because they're going after a goal. And there's that saying, all those things that you want to do, just do it. And they're constantly going after a goal, but they're never accomplishing it. And it's like, oh, I have this goal, and because they burned themselves out. And so they literally have to stop. So they lose all momentum, they lose energy, and they just stop. And so that's one of the key things that it is a spectrum, and why people don't even realize it, because they may think, what do you mean I have high functioning anxiety? I need to function first. I'm not accomplishing anywhere what I want, because they don't even realize the reason you're not doing it is because you're burning yourself out.
Yeah. So there's so much more that you could be doing if you were taking better care of yourself.
Yes.
Right, and more effectively.
Yeah. And then there's the whole issue of happiness. I mean, our society is not, and maybe it's not just our societies, but maybe it's something that's true across the globe. Society really is not focused on you choosing to be happy, to be happy. People expect that you work hard, you suffer a little, and then the reward for your hard work and suffering is the happiness. It's only now that over the last few years or so, that you've really had people talking about happiness as a prerequisite for success. But for a long time, it was believed hard work. So you put your nose to the grindstone and you start pushing. And that's how we've lived our lives. So, what kind of mindset shift do we need to start engendering in our society to get people out of that?
Yeah, to realize that, success doesn't lie in productivity as much as I get done, right? That's not success. That's not happiness. I think, really starting to ask the questions, are you happy? Do you know what happiness is? What does that feel like for you? I think at the baseline, a lot of people don't know what that is. It's definitely been a shift, I think, lately, where people, you hear protect your peace, or, set boundaries, and all of these things that people are starting to shift in their mindset around, like how they're working. I'm not, staying in jobs and doing things that doesn't, bring me happiness and peace. And so there's definitely a shift occurring, but needs to happen more. Like, I think redefining success is a big part of it, because I know, like, I had to redefine success I grew up in Trinidad, and when I went to the US, of course, it was ingrained in me. You go to America, you go to school, you get a career, and like you're saying, then you'll be happy. I got my degrees and all of these things, and I was done and was in a great place at my career by 29. What happens to the rest of my life? Like, what else am I supposed to do? So it got to a point where I had to really start thinking about, well, what actually does make me happy? And I understand, what you're saying, Marjorie, around like, this is the way I've always functioned, because I did it too. I was very set on my plan. I'm going to get my bachelor's, my master's, I'm going to be a therapist, I'm going to do all of these things. And I did all of those things. But then I had to start defining what my life was going to look like and what really brought me joy and what I wanted to do with it differently than milestones. Milestones don't make life successful.
All right, that's powerful. Milestones do not make life successful. That's interesting because that's not what we get taught when we're young. But you're right, that is part of that development and that recognition that as we go on in our lives, that we have to figure out what we want our lives to look like. So I'm going to jump in and refer to myself again to say this whole thing that we're talking about, happiness. For me, what do you mean happiness doesn't come at the end of achievement? What do you mean that you're supposed to know what happiness looks like? Never occurred to me as something, especially when I was younger, never occurred to me as something that you would pursue. It occurred to me more as, it just happened. If you found happiness while you were working hard, that's great. But, keep with that nose down to the grindstone. So I think it's very interesting that we are beginning to recognize, as one of our guests or attendees is saying, that we're slowly killing ourselves mentally with the way that we are operating right now.
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. And definitely probably still a lot of like our physical health issues too, like Sonia was saying, because when we're on, the so-called grind and pushing ourselves, we're not eating right, we're not exercising, we're eating horrible foods. And of course, like, what do those things contribute to? Our high blood pressure, our diabetes, all these physical health things, that happen at, other stages in our lives. We're not always going to be young.
As much as we want to be.
Right.
And let's not forget the not sleeping right. Yeah, because that's one of those big things that we take for granted about hours of sleep. I mean, even in our society, sometimes there's the great pride in the fact that I only need 3 hours of sleep, or I only need 4 hours of sleep, and I can do whatever I need to do. People just walk around with that as a badge of honor, not recognizing that that is also destroying their bodies mentally and physically.
It's taking years off their lives. Research is showing lately. Yeah, you're literally killing yourself faster by not sleeping.
Yeah. And then when you add in the fact that anxiety really, as you're not sleeping and you're sitting there worried about the fact that you can't sleep and you have all the things running through your mind, then you're becoming more and more anxious and it's getting worse and it's like a never ending cycle.
Yeah.
Yes, it absolutely does. As we're talking, I'm remembering before I left my, busy nonprofit job and decided to start my practice, I used to literally like every Sunday wake up in the morning with anxiety, like jump out of bed, what's on the to-do list, like, tense, you feel it in your chest, the tightness, it's so uncomfortable. And spending, years in that place because I had to get my job done. I was a director of a program, I had to be busy and I was accomplishing my goals, right? I was working towards my degree and my licensure. And when I started to prioritize my wellness and started to think about myself more, then I started to make different decisions even in the way that I work. I changed the time that I start work. I changed my morning routine. I set different boundaries. Of course, I have my own business, so I have a lot more flexibility, over those things. But I can't tell you the last time I had to like go to sleep and is constantly thinking about work, or have woken up, in that haste of, oh my gosh, today I have, all of these things to get done. There's so much more ease to my life, once I started to live prioritizing happiness, wellness, rather than I need to get this done.
And that's what I'm reaching towards. So don't worry, you're setting a great example for people like me.
Mhm.
Because one of the amazing things, I was employed in an organization for many years, only recently transitioned into entrepreneurship, and somehow didn't seem to recognize that I no longer had to operate as though somebody was there behind me who's waiting on me for things, and I constantly have to be there at this time, and I have to start at this time, and I have to and have to and have to and have to. And so it's been like a year and a half, and it took me probably the first 6 months before I realized, it's okay that you can actually get up and leave home during working hours because there's nobody who cares. Once you get the work done, there is nobody who cares. And so it took a long time for me to deprogram my mind
Mhm.
and then to realize that it is possible to design my life how I want it to be.
Mhm.
Of course, easier said than done. All right. So go ahead, Sonia. I see you're about to say something.
Well, I suppose it's easier said than done, but I want to go back to getting off you have to get off autopilot first.
Mhm.
And so many of us are in that autopilot. We've given up our power to somebody else, particularly if you're working at a job and you're having a career and you don't run your own business. You're giving up your power, and therefore you are operating on autopilot. So you feel helpless. And what we want to really say to people is that you are not helpless. You are not stuck. You are not a tree. You can move. And what we will do is to help give you the tips and the techniques and the information for you to do that, to really get back in the driver's seat of your life and make a change.
Okay. It's good that you say that because I wanted to start getting down to some of the tips and the techniques and so on. But while you were talking, I just thought to ask you this. What was the genesis for you writing your book? Because your book is entitled Workplace Anxiety. So,
Mhm.
what were some of the things that maybe you were seeing in workplaces that you thought, people really need to think about, reconsider how they act and how they behave?
Mm. So my roles in I deal with people. I partner with leaders to improve the performance of people and the environments and systems that they work with. So I work with lots of leaders, and if you are a leader, I love to quote Billie Jean King where she says pressure is a privilege. You have a lot of pressure, and you are required to produce your best under that pressure, and it is a privilege. And so I see a lot of stress, a lot of workplace stress that needing it's very difficult to deliver. It's easy to deliver when you are in control and you are the one that's doing it and you're the technical expert. But when you elevate to leadership, which is we are required to accomplish goals through the work of other people, bringing them into alignment, creating an environment where they can thrive, that's a lot of stress. It causes a lot of anxiety. And so my book is that's where I started to write my book, which is if you do not have a clinical disorder, you are dealing with a lot of anxiety and stress. Here is how you should go about, based on my 20 plus years working with leaders. Here's how I would recommend that you go about doing that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that was a nice starting point. And definitely, I like the fact that you mentioned leaders because I think a lot of people who are in responsible positions in organizations are probably a lot of those who are operating with the high functioning anxiety and not even realizing. So
Hmm.
they don't even know that there's another way to live their lives. They're not even considering whether or not they are happy.
Yep.
So while Sonia was responding just now, Adesha, it popped into my mind to ask you, have you been seeing any kind of change maybe in your clients? Are you seeing more people coming to you with anxiety or maybe even just stress as a result, to let's say, of what's been going on in the world the last 2 years or so?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always worked with clients that have anxiety. That's definitely, one
Hmm.
of the higher, um, you know, populations of clients that I see. The
Hmm.
last, 2 years in the pandemic has not helped. It's
Yeah.
definitely increased anxiety. One factor I think that definitely influences anxiety is uncertainty.
Hmm.
And so in the past 2 years, there has been tons of uncertainty. Anxious people like to control things. They have plans and, they're organized and they have an A, B, and C, and it's supposed to be exactly like this. In the pandemic, there were so many unknowns, where we weren't able to control a lot of our lives and the things that were happening. And so, yes, there has been increased anxiety as a result of it.
Okay. So how do we move forward? How do those of us who recognize that we have the anxiety issues, or those of us who perhaps are just going along and thinking that all is well, what are some of the tips that you would give to us that we could start enacting in our lives, the changes we could make, the shifts in our thinking, any of those things that you feel could help us get started to be better at dealing with this anxiety?
Mhm.
I like to start with that mindset where you say you're in a Adesha were talking about earlier, because that's so very important. That's a fundamental part. And I love Khalil Gibran's quote where he says, our anxiety doesn't come from thinking about the future, but wanting to control it. And we want that safety and that certainty. And a lot of our anxiety is caused by that, because life is uncertain. As Adesha says, the last 2 years should teach you that, And I've discussed this before, that I learned that when I went bungee jumping, because when I was jumping off a bridge, I literally was trying to control how I landed. And it's like, I'm way up there, I'm like, this is crazy. You can't control this. You need to let go and let things fall into place, right?
Mhm.
And when I did that, it was the most freeing thing ever. And I was thinking to myself, well, how do I do this in my real life? How do I stop trying to control the future? And
Mhm.
how do I recognize that things will change? And when they change, my idea is to really understand that I can't control it, but I just need to adapt to it. I may need to pivot for it. And sometimes when I think things are falling apart, they may just simply be falling into place if I start thinking of how can I see opportunity here and stop being rigid and resistant and just seeking that certainty all the time. And so the mindset, I feel, is one of the most important things that you need to start with. How do you deal with uncertainty? How do you deal with change? And once we usually give an exercise, and once we figure that out, then we know
Mhm.
exactly where to start with an individual.
Okay, I want to dig into that a little. I'm going to let you respond in a minute, Adesha, but I wanted to dig into that a little because did you just go jumping off? First of all, that's nuts to me. So even though as someone who, likes adrenaline in my life, jumping off a cliff with a rope, with a rubber band, a giant rubber band attached to my leg is
Bad.
crazy. Absolutely crazy to me. So let
Yes.
me ask you, or what the question that I'm asking is this: how did you actually transition from how you were thinking before to that new thinking or insight that brought you? Because that must not have been easy to make that shift. I mean, I don't assume you came home the next day and the next time you encountered uncertainty, it was a totally different reaction.
I think it highlighted it to me. So
Okay.
jumping off the bridge with the rubber band around my legs, I got an epiphany in midair when I was literally trying to control how I descended off a
Yeah.
cliff. Okay, so
Yeah.
I was like, this is what I do in life. This is
Yeah.
ridiculous. I don't
Yeah.
look to see how I don't look for opportunities. I don't look for to just enjoy the moment and be present. I am in the future trying to control what happens. And so that
Okay.
just highlighted it for me. And my story, which was I was about to get married and move and leave everything behind. And so when I passed by it, I was in New Zealand with my then fiance. And when I saw the bungee jumping, I thought, you know, I'm about to bungee jump off my life. So maybe I should start with this and see what it's like. And that's when I had the epiphany in midair. And
Yeah.
then the most freeing moment was when I let go of that need to control, of getting out of into the future, into the present. And I
Yeah.
said, I need to take this with me. So I think it was a drastic way. And because it was drastic, it
Okay.
really impacted my life. And we know that drastic situations really make an impact on you. When you were growing up, the saying, you know fire burns, but if you've been burned, you really know fire burns. So yeah, so that was a drastic. So I don't recommend that everyone. I do recommend everyone going bungee jump
Fling
off a
themselves
building.
overboard.
Yes. It's a really quick way to learn that lesson.
Okay, well, the reason I went back to ask that question was really just to emphasize the fact that sometimes it is easier said than done. But then, as you say, you get an epiphany and you realize it, and it's almost like, your mind makes that shift almost instantly. But I want people to know that that isn't always the case. Sometimes it is a slow shift.
And
And
that's okay.
yeah, that's okay
Mhm.
too. And sometimes even with the quick shift in mindset, you forget and you go back to your old behaviors.
Mhm.
And so you have to keep self-coaching. You have to keep talking to yourself. You have to keep saying, okay, this was the epiphany I had. Why am I going back to this? I know better, so I have to do better. It is a constant engagement with yourself to keep you on track as you're going forward. And I like to say that because then people often, especially if you're coming from an anxiety place, you're going to beat yourself up over the fact that you're not doing it as well as the other person because you're judging you against what you see. You don't know the story, you don't know the struggle they're going through, but your natural tendency is to assume that you are somehow not good enough. So just wanted to put that in there.
Yeah.
Okay, so Adesha, what are some of the techniques or tips you'd give us?
Mhm. So I definitely agree with Sonia. The first thing we would work on is thoughts, right? So trying to identify like what thoughts or what we call like narratives kind of like dictate your life, right? Every one of us, we have these ideas about things, these stories that we tell ourselves. If I work really hard, I'll be successful. I have to grind and hustle. There's stories we tell ourselves. So you want to start becoming a more aware of your thoughts, because they're dictating your emotions and your behaviors and how you're leading your life. So I say definitely, awareness, tuning in, doing more check-ins. Like I said, when you're on autopilot, you don't stop to check in. So tune in, journal, do some gratitude, pray, like check in with yourself at the end of the day. How was today? How was my week? How am I feeling? Those moments of pause give us opportunity to slow things down and intervene the autopilot and allow us to be able to kind of check in a little bit more with ourselves, and creating a practice of that, I think, is a healthier balance between being productive and on the go. And, you can be successful in those ways and there's nothing wrong with it, but I think it makes it a lot healthier when you're able to stop and tune into yourself, and it creates a little bit more balanced. And then just doing the things that we know we're supposed to do that we don't do. Go to sleep more, eat better foods, go for a walk, just take care of yourself and be okay, with taking care of yourself. Take vacations. I think that's another thing that is like ingrained in culture, Caribbeans. I know a lot of my family that's work in the islands. They don't take their vacation time. They have piled up days, weeks, months, of vacation time that they don't take. Take the vacation time. Take a mental health day. Take a day to slow down and to rest and to be okay with that. Take a day home to sleep and do nothing and not feel bad about it. Because a lot of people, when they're coming off of the high functioning anxiety, they feel really guilty. Guilt is a part of the shifting process, I think, because you're so used to operating from that mindset that I know a lot of clients that, have high functioning anxiety, we have to work through the guilt of it. And I say, feel your guilt and do it anyway. Feel guilty. I was supposed to do this today. I need to go to the grocery and I know I need to rest. Feel guilty and do it anyway. You need to rest. You need to stop. It's okay. Know that guilt is a part of the process at times.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that because, when on the occasion when I say to myself, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do because I just feel like, doing nothing, I'm then there left with the feeling in the back of my mind, but I'm procrastinating, but I'm putting off this I have to do, and I still have that. And then there's the other, and what am I going to do? So my secret or my technique is to write down everything that's in my brain, because if it's not in my brain, I don't have to worry about it anymore. And it at least allows me to relax a little.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I would say is a lot of people who are anxious don't idle well.
Mhm.
So when we say to them that you need to take time for yourself, you need to rest, you need to relax, and so on. For me, I describe vacation as immersing yourself deeply into something other than work. So it's not that you do nothing because you can't do nothing, but you find something to immerse yourself deeply into. So that's the rationale I've told myself for years and years. Both of y'all look so horrified right now, and
No,
y'all are
I'm
just
just
trying to hold it in as I say that.
no, I'm
But
just saying
So,
I'm
maybe
just
if
saying I'm
you
not the only one. So how would you help us to learn to
mhm.
idle well?
well, you want to restore and refuel. So if you immerse yourself into something and you come out feeling refreshed, like you've just had 2 weeks of sleep, then that's fine. But the goal of refueling and re-engage and to be re-engaged is to understand that number one, your body you're going through a lot of stress physically. So we say that, like, when your body holds stress, you need to get it out. It's why if you meet a bear in the woods, the first thing it gives you that adrenaline to run so that you can physically get out that anxiety and that stress. So when we talk about coping mechanisms, there are good ones and there's some bad ones, and the
Mhm.
bad ones lead to diabetes, high blood pressure, weight gain, sluggishness, brain fog, tiredness all the time, even though you go to bed. And those are the things where you are self-soothing rather than refueling and coping well with it. And so you don't things don't get better, but temporarily you feel better. So you'll drink wine at night, you binge watch shows, you'll go shopping, and then after a while you start to realize that you overuse those coping mechanisms, but things are not getting better. And so we want you, as Adesha is saying, to get to good coping mechanisms and really understand that it's not that you need to exercise, it's you want to feel better. You want to be emotionally and mentally and physically ready for your goals, because some people have goals are up there and their coping mechanisms are down here, and so that's why there's that gap that you're consistently having, and you can't reach
Mhm.
that gap until you develop some better coping mechanisms. So when we say you have to eat healthy, you have to exercise and move your body, you have to stay present by learning how to meditate, that you have to take your vacations and then actually rest. And I know it's hard to beat the conditioning of, growing up in the Caribbean. We all grew up in the Caribbean here, where you were taught that people just don't go on vacation because somebody may take your job, or you're constantly raised with women who work so hard in your family. Like, I don't think I ever saw my mother sit still, because that's just how you move forward through hard
Mhm.
work. Rich people can rest and relax,
Right.
but if you want to get somewhere, you better
Mhm.
keep moving. And so you
Mhm.
have to, Desha said earlier, which is what are the narratives you're telling yourself, which is why the mental is so important. What are those belief systems that you have to unlearn? Because in today's society, we focus so much on learning. But as I said in chapter 1 of my book, you got to start with, what do I need to unlearn? What do I need to
Yeah.
get out of my head, that so I can move forward? Because the coping mechanisms you grew up with that help you to cope with your environment, you're still carrying with you, and it's
Mhm.
now hurting you. And so we need to
Mhm.
figure that out. So, what do you need to unlearn? What are those
Mhm.
narratives that no longer serve you? How can I dump them? And then how can I approach coping mechanisms that are much more productive for me and that will allow me to reach my goals?
Okay.
Mhm.
And I like one of the things that you said in there. It's not that we're doing these things. So it's not like we're exercising because we want to exercise, but it's to feel better. So a
Mm.
lot of our focus, and it's particularly as people who are so interested in the future, our shift in mindset needs to be that if we want to be capable of achieving those goals in the future, we need to figure out what's going to make us feel better. We need to
Yeah.
figure out what's going to be able to keep us going physically, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Adesha, you were about to respond.
Mhm. I absolutely agree, with all of that. Unlearning is such a huge, a huge part of it. To go on and on about all the things that we need to unlearn. as a culture and as a society and all of it. But paired with that is, what I was saying around like tuning in. And I do tell my clients, what is the outcome? Your outcome is to feel relaxed, to feel rested. If you're doing something and we do not have that outcome, then it's not working, right? If
Yeah.
you're binge watching or scrolling on Instagram, or you went out with the friends and you're still tired and you're exhausted, then you didn't achieve the purpose. So your coping mechanisms need to achieve the purpose of wellness and relaxation. And Marjorie, what you said earlier about that, it takes time. It's true. It's going to be a process. It's not going to happen overnight. We're talking about people who are, 20, 30, 40, 50 years that they've been doing the same thing. And it's going to take time for it to change. And that change sometimes happens in slow increments, right?
Mhm.
So you have to keep at it. You have to keep practicing. Mental wellness is like a muscle. You have to keep working it. You don't go to the gym one day and, have a six pack. I know, I try. I have to keep doing it.
We wish that could happen.
I wish. It doesn't work like that. So you have to get comfortable with the idea that you'll keep trying. I'll say that trying, not to say not to try meditation. I think most people's idea of what meditation is unrealistic. And need to recognize that it's going to take a lot of work to kind of, get to that place. But your breathing, just being able to be slower about the things that you're doing, changing the mindset, all of those things are really important to be able to help you create new practices about the way you're doing it, and set realistic goals for yourself. You're not going to jump from point A to point B. It has to be realistic. I'm going to try to do it twice a week. Then I'll try to do it 4 times a week. I'll try to check in 2 times, for the week. So I always try with my clients to set, small goals and to set realistic expectations about what is it that, they're trying to work on and to improve. And definitely, normalizing that it's gonna take some time. Trust me, it took me years to be able to uncondition myself from going 100 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for saying that and for reinforcing that. I am glad that you mentioned that yet again. So that recognition that we all have to have, that it takes time, but it is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. It's a process, but
Yes.
understand that society rewards events. Society doesn't reward process. And so one of the key things that you have to do is, they say life is a journey. You have to enjoy the process.
Hmm.
And so sometimes we don't build an enjoyable process. We want to achieve the goal so quickly that's why, we put so many things on our list, because we just want the event. And so you have to design your life, going back to that, you have to design your life in a way where you enjoy the process of having the energy to accomplish your goals, that you enjoy the process of going to work. And
Yeah.
so generally you want something, you really want, particularly for work, I say to people, you have to get a job or a career that even if you were not successful at it, you enjoy the process of it, because that's the key. That's where the magic is. And so it does take some time, as you're saying, and that is the approach that you really need to adopt. And if you adopt it, you will enjoy the process. So when you're exercising, you will find something that you like doing, rather than I have to exercise. What do I like doing that moves my body? And that's the way and the process that will really help you to build and change habits in this situation.
And I think I'm agreeing with you there, absolutely. And I think that getting to the point where, as we said when we were talking about mindset, where we expect to be happy. Because if you expect that happiness is a part of your daily living, then you understand that when you encounter something that's not making you happy, regardless of how much it's going to make you quote unquote successful, that it is not the thing for you. And happiness doesn't mean that you're giddy and you're giggling all day long and you're thing, but at least you are satisfied, you're in a place of comfort, you're at ease with yourself. And so one of the things I would also say to people is learn to unplug. Because whether we realize it or not, those little devices that we have that all have signals to let us know how we should engage with it and how often we should respond to every message, those also feed into the anxiety.
Mhm.
Because then every time there's a ping, you have to grab the phone to see what's happening. If you haven't looked at social media for the last half an hour, you want to go on and check to see if anything has come up that's new. You don't want to miss anything. That FOMO, that fear of missing out, all of those
Yeah.
things can add into the anxiety and make it even worse. So, as someone who's been suffering, well, not suffering, because I didn't know I was suffering, but as someone who was living with high functioning anxiety, I have found that that's key for me. So on
Yes.
weekends, you know, I work during the week. On weekends, I can put the phone down. I'll check it maybe in the evenings or so, but I don't have to have it with me. And if I miss a call, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. You know,
Yes.
things like that to try to shift the way that you think about things.
Yes. And that is so important. Digital detoxing, because what it does is it gives us these dopamine hits so
Yeah,
easily
every
that,
time.
you know, the moment we're bored or whatever, we go just to scroll because we're
Mhm.
having that immediate engagement. And you know, social media platforms are making money off your anger, your outrage, and your negativity. So you really do, I think with Marjorie, that is so important, because one of
Mhm.
the fundamental reasons why people are not don't necessarily think about happiness, because it's already defined for them, and
Yeah.
it's defined on social media platforms. Once before, you defined happiness by the person who lived next door to you. Now you
Mhm.
define happiness by comparing yourself to some person who lives on the other side of the world with a different economic background. And so one of the key things to
And a
really make
glorious camera filter.
exactly. I was watching something the other day, and the woman said, "Well, you know, I really meet people in person, and you really understand that they, you know, we don't all look that pretty." I was thinking to myself, "It's so true. When you meet people in person, we're not all that pretty
Mhm.
because we don't have that natural filter
Mm.
that comes out." But it's really important that in trying to determine happiness, and Marjorie, you're so right. Happiness is not a consistent high. It's fleeting moments of joy throughout your day. And so you try to build that, those moments, is that you have to determine, how do I validate myself? Because so much of our happiness today is built on other people validating us, whether it's your
Mm.
boss, whether it's some, you know, your that comparison or whatever. So if you really want to be happy, I would say journal. First of all, detox, get
Mhm.
rid of all that is coming into you.
Mhm.
And Adesha said it really well, that we're raised with that blueprint for success. You go to school, go to university, get a big job, then, you know, and
Yeah.
then when we do all that, we look around and realize, and you know, and our parents and family go, we can wash our hands off you because you're successful. Let's
Right.
go on to the next person. And then
Yeah.
you're like, they're going, well, I'm supposed to be happy, but I'm not. And now
Yeah.
you
Mhm.
have to, at whatever age that is, whether it's 30, 40, 50, you have to figure out, well, no, what is happiness for
What do I do?
me?
Yeah.
But I want that happiness without losing the safety and security and validation that I built already
Mhm.
here.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the key things in journaling, is to figure out, well, what do you want? How do I build an environment where I validate myself? And
Mm.
that's the next big, you know, so there's certain, like, you know, it's a journey that goes up and down. The first one is the mindset. You know, the second one is really building that process that you enjoy. And the final one is really figuring out, how can I make myself happy? Am
Yeah.
I happy when I look in the mirror without somebody else making me feel like I'm not a success? I'm, you know,
Yeah.
in that way.
All right. And in our last 5 minutes, let's talk a little bit about gratitude because we mentioned it in passing.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the role of gratitude in helping us to cope with what's going on and helping us to get into that wellness mindset. Now there
Mhm.
is a lot of talk, there are a lot of practices. A lot of people say yes, they write, they do their gratitude journaling. Some people just write down 3 or 4 things that they're grateful for each day. What would be a good gratitude practice that either of you would recommend that our audience could practice, pursue?
Mhm.
I think the things that you mentioned so far is fine, whether you want to write it down, whether it's a form of journaling, There's places you can do that in your app. For me personally, it's just in the moment. I'll just say it in my head. So sometimes as I'm going through my day and I have a moment that I remember something or the way something was or what I have now, I'll be like, you know what? I'm really grateful for that. I was like, I'm really thankful, that this is the way it is. I'll be thankful. I'm thankful I have my car to drive around because I don't want to, take public transportation places. I'm grateful for this. So you don't have to, you just need to make it a practice. I think one that you're capable of doing and sustaining. A lot of the times we're looking for tips and recommendations that work for other people that don't work for us. So find a way that you can incorporate it in your life that it comes with ease and it doesn't feel like a task and a chore, but something that you can just make habitual.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes. And we know that the value of gratitude is really that it shifts your mindset away from worrying about what could potentially go wrong and start helping you to focus on what is going right. What are the things that you're
Mhm.
grateful for? What's working out for you? Sonia, you were going to add?
Yes, so I definitely, well, I'm extra, so I take my affirmations, and so for one of them every morning that I listen to when I'm raising from sleep is thank you, Lord, for having the universe work to my benefit and in my favor. And one of the things that I do throughout the day is recognize when that's happening. Like I literally know when, oh my God, thank you. This has worked out for my benefit and in my favor. And then what it enables me to do is see all the good that happens to me. Because sometimes if you don't pay attention, you feel, like awful. You feel like things are not going well. You got a big no, but then it helps you to note I'm getting good things. It's not all bad. And so that gives you power to keep moving. When you start to recognize all the good, you start to see it. Like I say all the time, for uncertainty, your job is not to retreat into safety and security, which is what we do. We retreat. Your job is to step forward and look for the opportunities. And so when you're looking for things to be grateful for, the universe opens to you. And so, yes, Marjorie, if you are not doing that, then that is a
Yeah.
practice that you must, that you really should
Incorporate into your life.
incorporate.
Yeah. The value of practicing gratitude is greater, perhaps, than any of the other things that we practice. It does amazing things to your mental health when you start to realize that, in truth, things aren't as bad as you think they are. And
Yeah.
that's what practicing gratitude helps us to see. It moves us beyond that, but it at least gets us there to the point where you realize things are not as bad as you were thinking they were.
Mhm.
So, ladies, how could anyone get in touch with either of you if they wanted to? We've been seeing some interesting feedback and so on from our audience. We've had a few people saying it's very helpful, it's very relevant, it's a great discussion, and they are glad that they were able to get the information that you shared. Now, if they want to follow you on social media, Sonia, how do they get in touch with you? Where on social media? Or if they want to reach out to you for any kind of coaching?
Well, definitely connect with me here on LinkedIn. Just type my name in, Sonia Layne-Gartside, and you'll find me. Follow me over on Instagram, not Twitter. I wouldn't recommend that at all. But definitely Instagram. And of course, SoniaGartside.com. You can reach out to me from that
All
at any
right.
point.
Thank you very much. And Adesha, how can anyone get in touch with you to utilize your services or follow you on social media?
Sure. So my Instagram is at Queens with a Z _ therapist. And my website is queenstherapist.com. Again, that's with a Z.
All right. Thank you very much. So we've had a great discussion here this evening, ladies. I think that perhaps you have brought great insight to a lot of people out there who are similar to me, who've been operating under anxiety and thinking it's just normal life and that we can go along doing that forever. But I do like the fact where you've mentioned that you can do it for a time, but you can't do it all forever. There's going to come a time when you're going to get older and you will see the detrimental effects of constantly living under that strain. So thank you very much, Sonia Layne-Gartside and Adesha Richards-Thornhill, for joining me Marjorie Wharton, as we go through this discussion on anxiety and high functioning anxiety. Where do you fit in? Now, you can follow our page on LinkedIn or on Facebook, Breakthrough Performance Coaching, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, Breakthrough Performance TV, to see a recording of this, to follow any of our upcoming events, to just keep in the mix, because this is really the start of a discussion that we want to keep having that's going to help people function and perform at a higher level. So thank you very much, ladies. Have a very good evening. Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you. It's
Thank
now
you.
midnight here, so
All
it's
right, nice.
it's
So
Friday
we're
morning.
happy that we were able to get you. All
Okay.
right.
All right. Thank you.